اوكي نكمل هسه الجزء الثاني من المحاضرة. مثل ما قلنا قبل شوي هذا classification الثاني من ال Pell and Gregory classification system, and this system uses the measure the difficulty of impaction or the level of impaction based on the level of the occlusal plane of the third molar with the second molar. So class A means the level of the occlusal plane of the third molar is almost within the same level of the second molar. However, guys, you can see this one is not fully erupted. It is partially impacted. See, only the less than 1/3 of the crown is seen above the ramus line. And here, class B, that the crown or the occlusal plane of the crown of the impacted tooth is at the point between the occlusal plane of the 7 and the cervical line, and anything below the cervical line of the 7 gonna go to the class C. So as you can see, the way we go deeper and the difficulty is for the removal is gonna be more. Okay, now how can we utilize these 2 or 3 types of systems to assess the difficulty of impacted third molar? Here, this image can show you how we can use the Pell and Gregory classification system at the same time. So this one is a class 1, 2, 3, and this is class position A, position B, position C, or class A, B, and C. So for class 1 means that the crown of the impacted third molar has enough space to erupt between the distal point of the second molar and the anterior border of the ramus of the mandible. And again, this one we have a good space. This one we have space and the tooth is erupted. This, okay, but it's lesser than the upper one, so it's going to be class 2. Okay, but let's go in rows, not vertically. So class 1 for the Pell and Gregory classification can take in a position A, B, or C. What do we mean? Like, we have enough space for the crown of the third molar to go to erupt in between the distal point of the second molar and the anterior border of the ramus. However, we see at this point the tooth is fully erupted here, so the occlusal plane of the crown of the third molar is at the same level of the occlusal plane of the second molar. Here, no, it's a bit lower, so it's going to be position B, and here in the position C, which is mean it's below the cervical line of the second molar, but all of this row belongs to the class 1. Same thing goes for the class 2 and class 3. Let's take class 3 for example. Right? Class 3 for the Pell and Gregory, what does that mean? Mean like the crown of the third molar is completely embedded or trapped by the ramus of the mandible. Here we can see this is the anterior border of the ramus of the mandible. Again, it's not showing us exactly the classification, but let's see, it's more than 2/3 of the tooth is impacted behind the anterior border of the ramus of the mandible. Here the crown is trapped, but the occlusal plane is with the same level of the adjacent tooth, which is again position A. Position B, it's going to be the occlusal plane of the impacted third molar somewhere between the occlusal plane of the second molar and the cervical line, and position C is it's below the cervical line. So if we make like a sectioning and drawing lines between each other, we can conclude this one. Class 3 position C is going to be the difficult one to remove. the way we go this way is going to be more difficult, and the way we go this way is going to be more difficult. So if you go this way and this way, this one is going to be the most difficult one, and this one is going to be the easiest one to extract. On the top of this, we can add the angulation too. So this one, it's almost mesio-angular angulation. And again, this one could be a vertical impaction. This one could be a vertical impaction. So again, when we assess the difficulty of any case, we need to bring all of these three systems together to reach the final assessment of the tooth. Let's have this as an example. So let's go first with the Winters classification for this tooth is mesio-angular classification. Okay, and let's go for Pell and Gregory classification. Which class is this one? Let's say in relation to the anterior border of the ramus of the mandible, we can see that part of the crown is partially interrupted underneath this line, the anterior border of the ramus of the mandible, which is going to be class 2. And which position? We see the occlusal plane of the third molar is somewhere between the occlusal plane of the 7 and the cervical line, so it's going to be B. So the difficulty, we still at the first column and row, so it's going to be moderate difficulty. And again, for this one, let's have a quick look on it and draw some lines. Let's see, check the angulation. So it's partly mesio-distal angular inclination of this one. This is number 1. Number 2, let's see how much is of the crown is trapped under the ramus of the mandible, which is less than like this is the anterior line of the ramus of the mandible. So let's say it's not fully the crown, so more than half of the crown is interrupted underneath the ramus of the mandible. So it's going to be class 2, and the position is A. So because we have the occlusal plane is at the same level of the second molar. So again, it's a distal angular, class 2 and A. So is it difficult? Yes. Why? Because it's distal angular and trapped it behind the anterior ramus of the mandible. For the first time when you see this image you can say oh it's very easy. يعني أول ما تشوف هاي لو بيجي تكون سهلة وأقدر أشلعها، بس بالحقيقة هو يكون كلش صعب هاي الحالة. Finally, we're going to go to the root morphology. Again, root morphology and assess the root for the length, shape, number, curvature, any periodontal space, and we need to assess the mesiodistal width of the root compared with the mesiodistal width of the crown. If the mesiodistal width of the root is broader or bigger than the mesiodistal width of the crown, then we need to anticipate more bone removal or tooth section or root sectioning, just to make the removal or the path of draw is easier for us. So I'm going to talk in details about why if the length of the crown is less than 1/3 of the root is less. If it's less than 1/3, it's going to be difficult to remove. Things you need to keep in your mind, it's the apex of the root, the tip of the root. Always you need to assess it. Even if you need the 3D image, go and take it, because sometimes the tip is going to be curved and the direction totally different than the angulation of the tooth. يعني مرات نلقى التوث هو ميزيو angular عندنا بس التip مالته rotated buccally لو lingually، فمن حنشيله راح تنكسر التip definitely. The ideal length of the third molar to when you want to remove it, it's going to be from 1/3 to 2/3. يعني مو full root. يعني مثلا مريض كان عنده مشكلة بالأسنان بالثيرد مولر وده يعاني من السترونج انديكيشنز اللي عندنا. خلينا نقول ريكرنت بريكرونايتس وخدناها إلى PGI، طلع عندنا الروتات مالته ما كاملة، خلاص هذا أسهل وأحسن طريقة وأقدر أشلعها بدون أي مشاكل. بس إذا فول روتد لا again، يعني هذا تشوفه بعد ما كامل الروت مالته وقريب من الكنال. if it's when the root is fully formed, then it's gonna for sure it's gonna go and do some damage to the nerve when we remove it. هاي الفيلر بين النيرف كانال، طبعا النيرف أنا ما أشوفه بس أشوف الكانال وأتوقع إنه النيرف يمشي هنا. زين إذا اللينث مال الروت أقل من ثلث ما تسوي لنا مشكلة، بالضبط راح يصير مثل الخرزة أو الدعبلة اللي ما أقدر أشيله، فراح يسوي لنا مشاكل. فهمت هاي الكيس واحد لا يستهين بيها، احتمال يصير displacement للتوث بال adjacent spaces أو growth lingual. shape of the root مثل ما قلنا يعني single shape والnumber. single conical shaped root is easier than this type of root which is multiple and diverged root. بالإضافة عندنا شنو horizontal impaction. وعندنا عندنا إذا أخذنا على البوزيشن مالته هذا position C، إذا أخذنا على classification من 1 to 3 هذا راح يكون classification 3 لأن totally interrupted underneath the ramus. so هذا كلش difficult، هذا so easy to be removed. however it's in position B and class 2. follicular size surround the tooth، يعني كل ما كان عندنا impedimenta space دار مدار التوث، خاصة مثلا مثل هاي المنطقة نشوفها هنا عندنا space بينه وبين السفن، يكون شغلنا أسهل من ما مثل هذا اللي هو كل شي ما عندنا أي space. باليونج patient راح تكون الاكستراكشن أسهل من الأدلت أو من الكبار بالعمر. density of the bone، proximity للinferior alveolar nerve، أي شك بيها مثل هاي الحالة اللي كنا قبل شوية، يعني مثل هاي الحالة كلش قريبة من النيرف من الكنال، فأخذ كومبيوم CT سكان ودا أشوف إنه البوردر مال الكنال يعني شوية مختفية من التوث، فاحتمال التوث يكون طاب عليها. and proximity to adjacent tooth. then two table summary أتمنى تطلعون عليها وتقروها لأن أغلب النقاط الموجودة شرحناها بالمحاضرة. الثيرد الماكسيلاري ثيرد مولر classification مالته نفس الانجلر classification اللي عندنا بالمانديبولار، بس المشكلة بالثيرد مولر it's erratic. it's the most erratic and variable root formation teeth، يعني يتوقع الروت مالته يكون بهالطريقة هاي إذا مو يعني بغير شكل دائما. it's easy to extract but we have to take an x-ray and for every single extraction you have to take x-ray because sometimes with the first premolar you're going to have a root like this. So for extraction it's a mandatory, it's a must to take an x-ray. Higher the classification مالتها the vertical, distangular, mesoangular. Now what are the steps of surgical procedure? It's just like any normal surgical procedure. First of all, we need to design and reflect adequate flap for accessibility, remove overlying bone, sectioning of the tooth if I need it, remove the bone if I need it, delivery of the sectioned tooth with elevator, not with a forceps, and preparing for wound closure. And again, flap design and reflection. Let's go. So mostly we use the envelope flap. The envelope flap, it starts from the medial point of the first molar and extended to follow the cervical line or the clavicular line of the crown, then extended distally, distolaterally. Don't go to the lingual part, go buccally and follow the external oblique ridge of the mandible, because if you do go straight forward from this point to this point, then you're going to end up damaging the inferior alveolar nerve or lingual nerve because the mental foramen is very close from this area. So always go in the buccal direction. For me, I don't prefer use the envelope flap. I always use with vertical